Welcome back to A Defense of the Awkward Moment. Today we're going to talk about Stranger Things, an 8-episode miniseries that you can find on Netflix. Joining me today is the always excellent Michael Zupon.
Hello.
I have no freaking idea what I was going to say. Supposed to record the intro before we actually start rolling. I've already got the other parts of this thing recorded, so I'm just going to stop this now and splice them in. Professionals! I will record the opening for this later, so we don't need to worry about that. I've already got all the theme song stuff done. But, yeah, Stranger Things. Tons and tons of hype. You can't... so many people, like relatives and stuff, and friends to a lesser extent, are just stupid and drooling about this thing on social media. I wasn't originally keen to watch it because I don't really do horror, and everybody's like, well, it's not, blood and guts horror, it's and then I finally sat down and I watched it, and I'll be honest, I found it wanting in a couple of areas, but all that having been said, some people have asked me what to describe Stranger Things to them. I've had relatives ask me to describe Stranger Things to them, and what keeps on coming to mind for me anyway is like one part Goonies, one part Alfred Hitchcock, and one part something else that I can't remember. Oh yeah, the Twilight Zone. I suck at this game. Yeah, if somebody asked you that, how would you describe it without completely just bollocking the plot?
Well, to get back to why I think there is so much hype about it, is that there's been such a revolution in good TV over the last, all the way back to The Wire, but those were HBO shows, Sopranos, all of this great television, and somebody took the great modern television techniques and applied nostalgia to it by going back to a 1980s setting, by bringing in the Spielbergian movies of the 80s, the E.T., which Stranger Things touches a lot on.
11 is
E.T., hiding in the basement, dressing up in a wig and a dress, and going around town, riding on the back of a bicycle. So you have the E.T., you have the Goodies, you have a little Stand By Me in there with, kids going out to solve problems or find things that, the adults don't have time with. Even like you said, there's a strong Twilight Zone and a little bit of Poltergeist, even, especially with being able to.
I hadn't thought about the Poltergeist thing. I hadn't thought about that at all. But the business with the radios,
being able to communicate across the divide through electronics, being able to the television versus the Christmas lights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose before we go too terribly much further, I should probably wave the spoiler flag around. We haven't really done it so far, but I intend to stomp all over just about every part of this television show here in the next...
Well, since I think you're the last person on your list that has seen Stranger Things, I don't know if spoilers are going to be much of a problem.
I'll get obliterated if I don't. It's the law of the internet. For all the 80s-ness of the thing, and I have to resist the urge to reach out and backhand somebody who's like 21, 22, 23 years old going, oh my God, they did the 80s so well. I'm like, you were a science experiment when this happened. Not even that.
Well, these were the movies that their parents made them watch when they were growing up.
I don't think most of the 23 and 24-year-olds have freaking seen E.T.
Well, the E.T. and the Goonies.
There's some Adrian's wife. No, it's not Adrian's wife. It's Sarah. Sarah still hasn't seen the Goonies, and yet she repeatedly, Tinker.
You gotta go.
Yeah. Okay. Come here, sweetheart. A buddy of mine. His wife still hasn't seen the Goonies, and yet hey, I need you to let go of that. Thank you. And yet she still insists on hailing everybody with, "Hey, you guys," and we're really, really upset because you can't do that unless you've seen the movie.
Unless you watched The Electric Company growing up.
Yeah. And while we're on the subject of The Electric Company, the story overall, in terms of pacing, when I think about it, and I love the business of taking a story like this, and instead of trying to stretch it out over an entire season, Netflix has gotten really, really good about smaller episodic content. And I love taking a story like this and stretching it out over 8 seasons because you get good, concise storytelling a lot of the time, and you don't have to wait as long for additional content. I really, really enjoy that. That having been said, in my opinion, I almost feel like you could have cut, makes no difference, an episode's worth of time and fluff and exposition out of the 8 episodes and maybe pick the pacing up a little bit. And I wonder when I think about that if I don't appreciate the suspense of it enough. And I freely admit, with all the toys and the gadgets, as I sit here with my computer and my microphone and cell phones and yada, 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 if I just don't appreciate the art of good suspense enough, and if I'm officially one of those guys that wants instant gratification more. How did you feel about the story and the pacing?
The only really bit of fat that could have been trimmed from the plot would be the whole deal with the father. I don't think he brought anything to the story. I think a disappeared father would have done just as much as this parasite showing up in the middle of things, not really contributing to anything, just being another naysayer for Winona Ryder's character. Yes, you really are crazy, hon. Crapping on his kid. I don't think he really brought anything to it. I don't know if you could cut an entire episode's worth. You might be able to get a good 20, 30 minutes with him out of it. Really, what else would you have cut? I mean, the only other really big chunk of time you could really cut out is Barb, and you need something to happen to another character to show you how dangerous the Demogorgon is.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned Barb, and we're going to touch on this again here in a little bit. I really had a problem, as insignificant problems go. I really had a problem with the beginning of the Nancy, Barb, Steve story arc. I could not be bothered. I'm almost to the point that I wanted to fast forward past all the crap that was happening to them. And then they all went inside and left poor Barb alone sitting on top of the diving board. And I was like, wait a minute. Shit's about to get real.
Yes, things are about to happen.
She is toast. So in retrospect, I don't know. I totally agree with you about. Will's. Not Will. Why can't I remember? Yeah, Mike's. No, it wasn't Mike's father. It was Will's father. The names, and we're going to touch on the name thing again here in a second too. I totally agree with you about Will's father, Winona's ex. He's useless. A useless part.
Nobody remembers his name because he wasn't important.
Yeah.
I do think to replace that, you almost could have had another episode or 2 of them trying to figure out the behavior patterns of the monster. I think they kind of rushed through a lot of that. I think one of the big story holes, and we can get into that later if you want, about the monster's behavior is it's supposedly attracted to blood, but things are constantly bleeding, especially in the woods.
Yes!
And the fact that he shows up because Barb, nicked her hand on a beer can and kills her, and then it takes a, deer that got hit by a car, which is covered in blood, but,
Yeah.
Not to get disgusting, but, on an average day, 25% of the women are menstruating. That's a lot of blood. This thing should have been running rampant through the town.
Menstruating and wandering around the woods. The behavior of the monster and the overall handling of the monster, especially in the last episode, they make such a big deal. One of the kind of eyebrow raisers that I had with it is they made such a big deal out of we've got the spikes and we've got the nail bat, which was very cool, and we've got the bear trap and we've got the gasoline, we've got the fire extinguisher, and they beat the holy hell out of this monster, and then poof, he's gone back to the Never Never, the Shadow Veil, I guess is the appropriate term.
The Upside Down.
Yeah, the Upside Down. He's gone back home. Are we to believe that they killed that one? And there's just because you at one point, and we'll touch on this as well a little bit later. At one point in the last episode, when Hopper and Joyce are wandering through the Upside Down, you see the egg vaguely. Well, I won't even say vaguely, not so vaguely reminiscent of H.R. Geiger's work. And for me anyway, that makes me think that maybe there's more than one of these things running around. Are we to believe that they killed the one that they went after inside of the home with fire and bear trap and nail bat, or did he just sort of magically go back home and regen his wounds really quickly because he's a punk and go after the other party members?
I think the implication is that he got away because it seems, from the story standpoint, that this is the only one that knows how to cross over. Else we would be inundated with these things instead of just one popping up back and forth.
And if he did get away, then either the fire and the nail bat and the bear trap didn't touch him at all, because he was remarkably spry. Assuming it was the same monster, remarkably spry when he got to the.
And bullets don't seem to do much.
Yeah, not much.
My guess would be that it's vulnerable to fire, but not much else. Like, I don't think the nail bat did anything. I mean, it may have knocked him off balance, but I think the fire was the real killer.
Yeah. Putting aside the bullets thing for now, unanswered questions was another really big thing that I had on my hit list to talk with you about. A lot of folks online are kind of frustrated with the number of unanswered questions that came up even after the end of the 8th episode. And where that's concerned, I guess I'm of two minds about unanswered questions, that there's a really, really big difference between questions that you want answered and questions that you need answered in order for there to be a cohesive story. Did you ever see Prometheus?
No, I did not.
Well, for the 5 listeners out there that I have, Prometheus ended with an awful lot of questions up in the air, but they were questions that you wanted the answer to, not needed. It was okay that they didn't answer the questions. And it's all right in my opinion anyway. It's all right in some storytelling exercises to be left wanting for those answers. Just that, you know what, sometimes you don't get them all. I really kind of feel like Stranger Things was teetering on the edge in certain places as far as unanswered questions went, as far as things that you just weren't going to get shared because of the nature of the show versus things that kind of hindered the telling of the story. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure what questions they left out there that needed to be answered. They dropped some sequel hooks, so if it was popular enough, they could make more and have something to build off of. But also, like a episode of The Twilight Zone, they left enough things ambiguous that if it ended there, it would still be a satisfying viewing experience. I didn't read anything about unanswered questions. Do you have an example or what people were freaking about?
Yeah, I don't want to go too deeply into it because I want to talk about it later in the there's like a whole.
Well, then we'll just do it then.
Well, you know what? Heck, let's just go ahead and jump ahead and do this now. The business with the unanswered questions of this series. Let's just go ahead and do this now. At the end of episode 8, when the boys are all back downstairs in their basement playing Dungeons and Dragons, after the campaign ends, Will casts Fireball and kills the whatever. The Hydra something.
Hydralisk.
Yes. Will casts Fireball, kills the Hydralisk. Blizzard, please don't sue me. And all the other boys are aggravated about how short the campaign was, which I thought it was cute that they griped about the campaign only being 8 hours long.
To be young and not have jobs or kids. More responsibilities.
But they do bring up a couple of things that I have no doubt are just intentional callbacks to the story itself about what about the lost knight, the proud princess, and the strange flowers that they found in the cave. So there's if you go online, there's piles and piles of speculation about this, about who each one of those items is talking about, and the unanswered questions that the show itself is waving in front of you. The common the common conception about the Lost Knight is people are talking about Hopper. Folks are curious about whether or not he's working for the Man now, given the private discussion that he had with them, and I'll have a conversation with you as long as nobody ever talks about this, blah blah blah. That scene in the I think it was in the last episode that he has with them while he's a prisoner. Some people think that Hopper's the Lost Knight. I think a lot of folks feel like Hopper's the Lost Knight.
I would call 11 the Lost Knight, since she's the one who actually is lost.
That's very, very interesting. There's a small group of people that feel that way. The 80s is if you follow along with the D&D motif of people going rescuing princesses, the knight doing a job, yada yada yada. There are a lot of people that feel one of the other things that they leave open is, what about the proud princess? And everybody, they have to be talking about 11. What about the proud princess? Well, 11 didn't really need rescuing. Will was the one who needed rescuing.
And without knowing the context of the story, the proud princess may not have been captured at all. She may have been the mission giver, in which case she's the Winona Ryder character.
Yeah. So the business with Hopper and whether or not he works for the at the end, after he walks out of the hospital, that Ford LTD pulls up and Hopper gets into it, and then of course there's the business out in the forest at the end when he takes the leftovers in that signature 80s Tupperware bowl, along with a couple of wrapped Eggos. To see that. Do you feel like that's he's leaving it out there in a box, just in case somehow she comes back out of the woods, or do you feel like maybe there's more there?
I think the initial conception or the initial impression that they're trying to leave is that he is leaving some kind of offering at a shrine. It's obvious from all of his interactions that he has at least some kind of a loose alliance with whatever secret government agency was running this thing, agency or agencies. And I don't know if he has become their supernatural troubleshooter, since obviously he can keep his head in a crisis, isn't freaked out by beings from the great beyond, upside down land. And you could probably easily do a spin-off series with just him forming the new X-Files.
So we're going to jump ahead on my list again because you mentioned the mysterious military institution. Initially, I kind of had gripes about, okay, well, it's the military, but what the hell is the military doing? Why isn't there any backstory there? And I grew up in the 80s, but was certainly young enough that I wasn't privy to some of the things that were going along from a political standpoint. And you're a year or two older than I am. I'm told, having talked to some people about this, that there was a big thing back in the 80s with the military experimenting with psychics and psionics.
That was more the 60s.
Oh, was it more the 60s?
MK Ultra and all of that was in the 60s.
And the Department of Energy. Callbacks to the Department of Energy performing experiments as well. I didn't know if that was what they were kind of alluding to. I'll be interested for anybody who's listening to this. Please feel free to chime in the comments. I didn't know if that's what they were alluding to with the presence of the military, or if this was supposed to be something else. So a little.
The backstory from what I got, the context presented in the show is that Eleven's mother was an MK Ultra scientific experiment, and when she was undergoing the drug and LSD and mind control and everything that they were performing on those poor saps back then, she happened to be pregnant with 11 at the time. Mm-hmm. So when 11 was born, they took the kid and continued the experiment with her.
Yeah, that's. I do remember that now from the history of the show. Um, it does sort of kind of tie things together there. Now that we sit here and talk about it, the strange flowers in the cave, the eggs again. Mr. H.R. Geiger, may he rest in peace in whatever creepy ass heaven he's in right now. I take that as a pretty strong indication that there's going to be more than one of these things hanging out in the Upside Down. I don't know if there's a whole lot to talk about there. But
So I'm not sure what the flowers. I mean, because it was Mike running the game and not Will, it's obviously something he either heard from Will or something he just is making up as a DM.
yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. The whole business at the end, when they're the spiel about the lost night and the proud princess and the strange flowers in the cave, did that crop up in an earlier episode and I just missed it?
No, because their first campaign ended when they fought Demogorgon, and Will's character got caught.
Oh yeah, because the new game with the Hydra was supposed to have been like what, a month later.
Yes,
Something
that
like
that was a new campaign. So obviously
okay.
Mike was coming up with stuff in the meanwhile, and I don't know if it was some sort of therapy that he was throwing in, experiences from what they really went through into the game, or like many DMs, he was making up stuff on the fly.
Yeah, I don't know. Good thoughts, good parallels. How do we feel about Will's new tapeworms?
Well, that's just obviously another sequel hook. It's either the Twilight Zone twist at the end, or it's the sequel hook.
Well, and that's one of those things that kind of makes me beat my head against the wall a little bit, because after everybody's gone through all the crazy crap that they have in order to get Will back, I realize that him being young, they might not necessarily have wanted to foster the truth, the reality of the situation to him. But at the point where you're puking up black slugs,
one would hope they would have seen that in the hospital.
yeah, one would hope they would have seen it in the hospital. That he maybe would have said something. Hey, how you feeling? I'm good, except for these leeches that I keep vomiting.
I puked up a tentacle.
Yeah. I mean, that's a little chamber of secrecy there.
Tell somebody.
Yeah, I don't know.
At least you're friends. Because we all know Lucas would run right away to an adult. That's his first death sentence.
Yeah, let's talk. We're going to talk about Lucas first. I'm definitely skipping around now. We're going to talk about likes and dislikes just in general here in a minute. But I have to rail about Lucas just a little bit. For as outcast as those four boys were, and growing up in the 80s as one of those D&D playing nerds, this was definitely for all you young people now who can go and hang out in public, and with women no less, who do things like this. This is a wonderful new world that you're living in, and definitely was not the case in the 80s. For as much as all those boys were outcasts, Lucas's treatment of 11, right up until the very, very, very end, he was a dick. He was, he was just a dick. For as outcast as they all were, you found somebody else who's clearly an outcast, and I get the fact that they kind of assage the whole thing over in a 5-minute conversation with Dustin, who I can't talk about enough about how much I absolutely love that kid and was just a quintessential 80s child. That they assage it over with a 5-minute conversation about, well, he was your best friend since blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, I feel like maybe they could have developed that whole thing and explained it a little bit better rather than just dumping in a 5-minute explanation and suddenly going, oh, well, it's totally acceptable that Lucas was an asshole then. Because even before, I don't know, it just really, really bothered me. Lucas was a really big prick until the very end. Let's see, what else is on the list here? You talk about MK Ultra, and I'm obviously 11's got some telekinetic mojo, and not just telekinetic mojo, but also kind of like extrasensory perception, with her being able to throw her mind out. I don't want to use a couple of buzzwords. Anybody who's read Julian May's galactic milieu books.
She's got the astral projections.
Yeah. We'll go there. So it seems like relatively vanilla metaphysical senses right up until in the school she body checks the giant hickey monster against the chalkboard and then dissolves them both. So now we're not just talking about somebody who's got telekinetic powers and astral projection, ESP. Now we're not just talking about that. Now we're talking about somebody, not to go full on D&D here, but with planar, with the abilities to move between planes and move between dimensions. I hate using that term. And that seems like maybe a step further from what originally. So it begs the question: was that just sloppy writing, or are we thinking that maybe 11?
Well, she always had the ability to travel to the other dimension. In fact, she's, one of her moments of self-recrimination was she was the one who opened the gate that allowed the Demogorgon to come through in the first place. So basically, her entire, she required the sensory chamber in order to achieve the necessary separation from her surroundings in order to do it, but she was traveling to that other plane.
I don't. Are you referring to the beautifully shot black, dark sequences where the background's all dark and she's just walking on the surface of the water?
Yes.
Just from a cinematographical standpoint, I'm not one of those guys that harps on about, the framing was gorgeous. All of those sequences were just stinking gorgeous. I don't kind of feel like that was her going to the other place as much as it was touching, kind of like peeking into it rather than directly manifesting like Hopper and Joyce did towards the end of the series.
Or if she was the one who opened the gate initially, the creature then started making its own entrances, like through the tree where it got the deer and Mary.
Not
Barb. Well, Barb was dragged through the...
the younger girl. Nancy.
Yeah, the one Nancy went through. So obviously there were ability, the creature at least had abilities to open up gates that humans could then travel through. I'm guessing that in the climax, 11 either utilized the creature's ability to open a gate to push him back through and had to follow him to close the door from the other side, or discovered that she had that own ability to close the gate, but she had to do it from the other side.
It does kind of beg the question, now that she's gone, who closes the gates? And for that matter, while we're talking about the closing of gates, the one in the Boyer's home, Will Boyer?
Will Meyer.
Meyer? Wow. Whatever. Will Joyce.
Will Byers.
Will Joyce and Jonathan. In their home, that the gate there, that obviously could be closed and rendered material again, and the one in the forest obviously became a regular old tree again, which now we're getting back onto the topic of more unanswered questions about, okay, if you're going to do this, and maybe they will later on down the line. One of the problems that I frequently have with things like this is the deeper you get into it and the more you begin trying to explain the behaviors. If you're going to start explaining the behaviors for something, for me anyway, you need to go hog and explain all of them. Like, why did some of the passages dry up and some of them didn't?
What would have been interesting is if the creature could only come through places where 11 had used her powers.
Yeah. And I don't know. Unanswered questions. Those are one of those things that, and I would really love the whole story behind it. And maybe we'll get it in season 2. Maybe that's the hook for people to watch more. I don't know. If they don't answer those questions, though, shotguns and rock salt for every single one of them. Did they discuss anywhere what 11 was? 11, the 11th child, the 11th experiment?
They never got into it. I'm guessing it's supposed to be presumed that she was one of at least 11 other experiment children.
Mm. And while we're talking about her, I was having a conversation with one of our coworkers. Hi, Scott. About 11, and about the fact that the little girl that plays her has to be like 12 or 13 years old. How do you tell a 12 or 13... How do you explain to a 12 or 13-year-old to act like that? And then, B, what does the 12 or 13-year-old have to have gone through in order to pull off? Because she absolutely frapping crushed it, as far as I'm concerned. But I almost feel a little bit sad for the poor little actress, because Girlfriend was doing an authentic job of being a little wackadoo.
Well, it's the same thing you had to put, poor Radcliffe through for the first couple of Harry Potter movies. Just without the Kubrick stare.
Well, he's British.
Well, maybe she trained.
Yeah. Beverage check. Yeah, likes and dislikes. About the whole show. Absolutely loved the setting with the kids in D&D. Especially back in the 80s. It's always nice to see that on TV. Dustin was without a doubt my favorite one of all the kids.
Okay, I enjoyed Dustin, but getting back to the reference material of the Goonies, why does the fat kid always have to be the coward?
Okay, I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
I'll give you that one.
Yeah. Why is Chunk the one who always has to... Why does Dustin always have to be the yeah.
Lots of Chunk. Dug the 80s, so much brown, so much simulated wood siding. Oh my god. Lots of callbacks. The backpacks, the walkie-talkies, the duct tape on bikes.
The only thing I didn't see was a Trapper Keeper.
Yeah.
I could have seen a Trapper Keeper. I would have been okay with that.
The synth music everywhere. Oh my gosh. So much synth music. There was a callback not too long ago on Facebook about there's an artist that did... his name's Jan Hammer, that composed all of the synth music.
Miami Vice.
Yeah, Miami
Everybody
Vice.
knows Jan Hammer.
Well,
okay, if you grew up in the 80s, you know who Jan Hammer is.
Which... we'll have to find out later. There's a wonderful video online of Jan Hammer playing a live version of Crockett's theme in Amsterdam.
Does he just go up and push a button on his computer?
It's so
and walk
sad.
Off the stage?
Yeah, almost. It's so 80s. Oh my gosh, it's so 80s. He's up there and he's got his. Thank you, Noah, for posting this video. He's up there and he's got an old computer with a Hercules blue chip monitor, all green text and black. Running his synth loops and stuff, and he's got his synth. But then for the guitar parts, he doesn't have a guitar. He's got a giant guitar slung around his neck, and he's in a bright yellow polo, and his collar's popped, and he is going to town. It's a beautiful thing. It really, really is. So yeah, love the synth music. Dug the fact that they didn't cheap out on the monster. Was not disappointed at all. The special effects in general were pretty good. Winona Ryder absolutely crushes it.
No one ever said she couldn't act. She just had a little episode there for a while. Where she needed some time to herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other likes? Other things that absolutely tickled your fancy?
I love the fact that I'm sorry. They did not take advantage of the modern day convention of making all the adults useless. both Hopper and Lydia, even when they were emotionally strained. Linda, damn, I suck at this.
Joyce.
Beetlejuice. All right, next time we do this, we're going to print out a cast list. And we'll just have it in front of us.
We're going to touch on this. Remember the name problem, people. This the last point that we're going to touch on here. I have it in big bold letters.
Okay, so yeah, Joyce and Hopper are both actual useful adults. Even when Joyce is at her emotional extreme, and even when she thinks she's going crazy, she doesn't lose focus on her goals. She doesn't get distracted. She doesn't fall asleep on the couch. Way to go, Nancy's dad. While there are useless adults, Nancy's dad.
The ex-husband.
Well, he's not useless. He's criminal. But,
yeah, that's fair.
Is it Nancy's mom? The two other cops.
Yeah, God.
There are there are adults who are actually doing adult things. They're not leaving it all up to Jonathan and Nancy to run around the woods with their bear trap and spiky bat.
Yeah.
So I did enjoy that. Just getting back to the way they just put the '80s in a blender, distilled it, and then poured it into a pretty 2016 television mold. It was good.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. Dislikes. Christmas lights are pretty much ruined for me now.
I didn't have a problem with the Christmas lights, but I've never hung them on a house, so I did.
Yeah, Christmas lights are pretty much done for me now.
I mean, they could have used a speak and spell and really gotten ET into it, but it's a little more crude than ET.
We've already covered how I felt like Lucas was kind of a dick until the very end. As much as he ended up playing a part later on in the show, I can't deal with Steve.
All right, Steve,
the boyfriend with the windswept hair. I can't deal with him. We talk about things that they could have cut out of the show. I almost feel like him and his useless friend could have been completely cut out, and it just could have been a semi-awkward relationship between Nancy and Jonathan. And the show would have been better for it. Steve, although after he gets his butt handed to him, the makeup on the side of Steve's face, Steve looked good.
The problem I had with Steve, I did not have a problem with Steve as an antagonist. The Karate Kid needs Billy Zabka.
Sweep the leg, Johnny.
Yeah. It showed that Nancy, was trying to experiment, change social classes, make connections, the 16 Candles part of the movie. I didn't have a problem with Steve as antagonist, and, the asshole always has to have his asshole sidekick.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
I did have a giant problem with him all of a sudden, with his heel face turn. He gets his ass kicked in an alley, and all of a sudden he's a good guy.
Yeah.
No. He should have stayed the asshole. It would have been another sequel hook, even, if there was some lingering resentment.
Yeah.
Or even if he was going out there to have a confrontation with Jonathan and then got caught up in the fight, he shouldn't have been the hero. He shouldn't have saved the day.
Yeah.
He should have seen something and been freaked out and run away. And then either has grudging respect or is terrified of Jonathan and Nancy going forward.
Yeah.
Because he saw them set something on fire.
But instead, it turns out he was a dab hand with a nail bat.
Yeah, and all of a sudden he's the good guy, and he's the one who actually saved them.
Yeah.
And he's with Nancy at the end. And
which bothers me profoundly. After all the shit that you've done... he gives Jonathan the camera.
Which is the pretty and pink part of the show.
Okay, so...
And that means Jonathan is Ducky, which, yeah.
Goodbye, Steve. We've already gone over the ex-husband.
Fuck you,
Steve. And now we get on. To the last part that I wanted to talk about. The difference between there are a lot of folks online. The sentiments is that this is just a huge rollicking success, and that everybody needs to watch it. And it's just absolutely an unforgettable piece of cinema. It isn't that for me, and while I'm not entirely sure why, at least not at first blush, the thing that tells me that it wasn't just it was pleasant enough watching, and the last couple episodes were solid gold. When they finally picked the pace up, a little bit of Robert Jordanism, moving slowly, but the payoff at the end was worth it. Ish.
No, that everybody would have died before they got to the last episode. They would have had to hire in somebody else to do it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. You and I have been struggling to remember names this entire time, and that's what struck me at when I talked to my brother about this, when I talked to Scott about it, when I'm talking to you about it now. I can't be bothered. The only reason, it's seriously, legitimately, the only reason why I know as many of the names as I do is I literally went and studied for this a little bit before we had this conversation so that I wouldn't be a gigantic microphone wielding shrub. And we're still sitting here. I can't be bothered to remember the names. Hopper and Joyce, which I couldn't remember Joyce's name for a long time either.
See? Yeah, and I kept wanting to call him Hooper, so.
Hopper was pretty much the only person whose name, Hopper and 11, were the only person whose names I legitimately remembered.
And Mike. And Will. Well,
but that's only because they're shouting his name
exactly.
in every other episode.
And I think that has something to do with it, is that when people are having conversations in this show, they're not saying, well, Dustin, I think we need to go do this. Well, Lucas, I disagree with you. Let's go ask Mike what he thinks. They talk to each other. You don't have to go say, hi, Steve. It's just like, hey, I know you. Dude, let's go get lunch. If somebody listened to us have a conversation in a normal work day when we both worked at the same place, they might not know our names by the end of it because we don't call each other by names. We have nicknames. We just say, hey, buddy, hey, jerkhead, whatever. You wouldn't necessarily know the names of the people involved to know who their characters are, what their motivations are.
I just, I don't know if it's a character development thing. I loved Hopper to death from beginning to end. And the backstory is the fact that he's the backstory with his kid, and the fact that in spite of that he's still a semi-functioning adult who can do what needs to be done and doesn't just turn into pudding.
Okay, but as a mental exercise, you can describe all of the characters in the show, even if you don't know their names.
Sure, yes, I can.
So you don't necessarily need to know their names.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Because, they aren't talking to each other and calling each other by names. You know Will, because Will Byers is on every poster, and he's on the little missing kid flyers, and
but I feel really guilty saying, well, there's the toothless one, there's the little white kid with the bowl cut, and then there's Lucas.
But, what are the names of the two sheriff deputies? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
But, whose name I will never forget? The owner of the diner. Benny. Poor Benny.
Alas for Benny.
That was one of the things that I actually had a problem with, but we didn't get into. Why did they have to kill Benny?
Given the fact that that is a good point, given the fact that they under rug swept everybody else.
They were already taking the kid away. He thought they were from child services. She hadn't done anything super special. She sat down, she had some french fries, and for that he had to die. That's just wrong.
Poor Benny.
That was mean. Benny was a good dude. I'm pouring one out for Benny.
All that having been said, not a bad show. Stranger Things, 8 episodes on Netflix. There will be a season 2. They talk about it being set 1 year after season 1, primarily because
they have to deal with the ages of the actors.
Because the 3 principals in particular, I guess, have changed so much in between the first couple episodes that they had to set it.
Puberty sucks for child actors.
Yeah, really. Again with the Harry Potter thing. I have to say, when season 2 comes out, there better be a hell of a hook at the beginning. It was a neat show, but I don't know at this point if I could be bothered to watch the second season. As opposed to just like watching a spoilers reel. Does Will turn into the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and
I imagine you're going to watch the second season like you watched this first season after everybody else has watched it and told you, hey, Steve, this is really good. You should probably watch it.
Barb comes back as Kerrigan, queen of the
Barb's
upside down.
She's going to come back as the alien queen.
Yeah.
And lay face huggers everywhere.
Oh.
And Steve will still be a douche.
With even bigger hair, because at that point we're approaching the 90s.
Yep. And he's just going to hook up an air hose to it. Although I guess actually the first one was set in 83, so we've only gotten to 84.
Oh, was it in 83?
I believe it was 83.
Well, yeah, there's still plenty of room for big hair, Aquanet, and shoulder pads.
Oh, yeah. And don't forget the leg warmers.
Oh.
Did
you see a single pair of leg warmers in the entire... I didn't see a single unitard. I didn't see any tights. I didn't see any leg warmers.
Well, keep in mind that the town they were living in was rural, so they wouldn't necessarily be on the cutting edge of fashion. And the only people that would possibly be doing Jane Fonda style aerobics would be useless Nancy Mom and Nancy herself. And you never really saw Nancy doing anything but studying during her school time. Well, and the
other thing,
the Steve.
Yeah.
But she wasn't doing aerobics or anything, so spandex and leg warmers would not have necessarily made an appearance.
Well, we could be grateful for the little things, can't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Nancy was skinny enough, putting her in spandex, that she would have looked like 11.
Also, now that we're talking about...
The young lady is petite.
I keep trying to find graceful ways to exit from this dialogue, but now that we're talking about 11 again, how... The high school science teacher... First off, the high school science teacher's got game. But how...
Not a lot of people would take a date to see The Thing.
The wigs, it must have been a really good wig. This is your cousin from Sweden, and they wear a lot of blonde wigs in Sweden. Okay, that always struck me as vaguely amusing. I wonder if that was actually. I wonder if that was actually a wig in a lot of the scenes when she was running around with it, or if that was like actually what her hair looked like.
Apparently, getting her to cut her hair was the hardest part for the actress.
Okay. I can see that being a problem if you were a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I can see that being a problem. Apparently, they spent like a legitimate amount of time on the haircut. Then it wasn't just, hey, put a 2-guard on that and go to town. Apparently, there was a considerable amount of thought.
You had to get a little fade in.
That stylish haircuts. They had to style it to make sure the electrodes would all
fit,
would all work appropriately. Yeah, I don't want to drag this on for too much longer, but the business with
we're rolling now.
The business with the psychic projections and this and that and the other. Did you ever watch Fringe?
No.
Yeah. For all the people out there who like Stranger Things, if you want something a little bit more adult and with a slightly more compelling episodic storyline, go watch Fringe. God rest Leonard Nimoy. Not a bad show. Not a bad show. If you like Stranger Things and Fringe is basically the adult version of Stranger Things.
I thought Fringe was about leather jackets in the 70s.
Well, yes.
Kind of like vinyl.
Yeah, Fringe is a good show. But yeah, Wild Tangents and all that.
If I ever have a podcast, it's going to be called Wild Tangents. Just to let you know.
You can't have a podcast named Wild Tangents because it'll be way cooler than the one that I'm already trying to do. I can't have that. It's a bad idea.
I'm just saying.
Stupid name.
Much like Wild Stallions, Wild Tangents will bring world peace.
Give it up, you pot-bellied stallion. Yeah. Well, Jerry Foxworthy there to capstone this whole thing.
Jerry Foxworthy?
Did I say Jerry Foxworthy?
You did.
Oh my god, I suck at this game. Yeah, we're done. Thanks for listening, folks.